We're now joined live in studio by Dan Perry, former Europe, Middle East, and Africa editor of the AP and the author of Ask Questions Later, a very interesting newsletter. Always a pleasure to have you in the studio. And I know that the frustration continues to brew. Explain how you're feeling about everything.
Look, I speak as a person who believes that Hamas is a complete and total abomination. It's a jihadi and nihilistic terrorist group that is an enemy of the Palestinians, of the Israelis, and of humanity. If there is not yet a two-state solution in Israel, which Israel needs more than the Palestinians, it's because of Hamas and the highly unfortunate success of their strategy of moving the Israeli public to the right and against peace through terrorist attacks. God forbid that Hamas should prevail. So, I've supported this war, but not the prosecution of the war. I have watched with increasing stupefaction as the groundswell of support that Israel benefited from after the horrific, historic terrorist attack of October 7th. I've watched it be squandered with mindless strategy and a policy that violates the basic tenets of Israel's fundamentals of war doctrine of 70 plus years long standing, which is keep the war off your territory, move it into enemy territory, drive for quick triumph, leverage that triumph for diplomatic and strategic and policy gains. But Israel has no diplomacy, strategy, or policy because Netanyahu refuses to say what he'll do with the Gaza Strip after Hamas is gone. And nature abhors a vacuum, and if there is nothing but Hamas, then there will be only Hamas. This isn't me and you in the studio. This is almost the entirety of Israel's strategic and security establishment that is apoplectic over this because they know the reason. It doesn't take a genius to understand the reason, and the reason is that Netanyahu cannot engage in any constructive day-after plan without risking his government, which depends on the far right. And plenty of people in Israel, I almost can't say the words myself because it suggests something treasonous, but plenty of people in Israel are sure that the government is trying to prolong the war in order to put time between the colossal failure of October 7th and the day of reckoning for that failure. You tell me, why is it that instead of going for the jugular quickly, as any other Israeli government in history would have done and did do, Israel's been waiting around and shuffling its feet for 4 or 5 months instead of even beginning the sine qua non of an invasion of Rafah, the last redoubt of Hamas, which is to remove the displaced population. What does the U.S. want? They're blaming the U.S. They're blaming Biden for stopping it. This is untrue. What Biden wants is for the displaced people to be moved out first. Israel should want it to prevent a bloodbath that would further blacken its name. What Biden wants is for this to happen quickly. Israel should want that too, because every day that passes and the war continues, Israel gets tarred and feathered in the world. It's already being investigated at the ICJ for genocide unfairly. The ICC is talking about potential indictments against not just Netanyahu, but the heads of the army unfairly. I can talk about that. It should not do this. That would be a terrible mistake and a violation of every precedent the ICC itself has set. Okay? Right. And Israel's being downgraded in the credit ratings, in the transparency ratings, and the democracy ratings, where we're suffering an academic boycott undeclared, soon to be an economic and arms boycott undeclared. All because this war is being prolonged with no purpose, no strategy, no day-after plan, no effort at public diplomacy to tell the world what is the hoped-for accomplishment that will make reasonable the great cost.
The stuff on the campuses has been 6 months, but now it's like at a level that's like a critical juncture.
I have to tell you, it will get so much worse. There's only a few thousand confused fools on these campuses. The bigger problem is when we lose the U.S. administration and the indifference that the government projects towards the potential loss of its last dependable ally in the world. And we're talking about a president who came to Israel and declared, I am a Zionist, okay? Mm-hmm. The indifference at the risk that this entails is so reckless that I believe to call it unpatriotic is really an understatement. I'm trying to use my words carefully, but of course, as someone who wants to see peace and prosperity for Israel and for the Palestinians, and for this war to end, because every day that passes, people die on both sides, and Israel's
the
economy is
hostages
harmed, and the hostages are dying. It just is. I have to say, you watch it and you don't know what to think anymore.
Quagmire that it's
Yes.
really. All right, we'll be back with you in a second. Dan, sitting here listening to all the goings on and continuing on, our conversation earlier, what does this mean?
Very little. It is a signal of the world's displeasure with Israel. The timing is not coincidental, so the world's unhappy with the war, as am I, as I think is 3/4 of Israel that we discussed before. But it also reflects the automatic majority against Israel and for a Palestinian state in the General Assembly, which will not pass the Security Council. So at the end of the day, it's a dead end. It's a dead letter. It will go nowhere. Look,
But just another sign of how much
the General
world hates
Assembly
Israel.
can declare that east is west and up is down. It doesn't make it so. There is no Palestinian state. You can declare that you want a Palestinian state, but it doesn't. You can't recognize something that doesn't exist. And I might add, there never was a Palestine before the Zionists and the Sykes-Picot Agreement carved out this territory, and the British Mandate created a Palestine. It didn't exist. A Sunni Arab from Tyre was not a different nation from a Sunni Arab from Acre 100 years ago. And that's just a fact.
Yeah.
But okay, the truth is, whether or not the world needs a Palestinian state, Israel and the Palestinians need to be separated by whatever means. And for all I care, let it be a Palestinian state. But it won't happen because the General Assembly, in its wishful thinking and its procedural nonsense, declares it so.
All right, Dan Perry, thank you very much, as always.